All right, I think you put the next slide up. It's 10 o'clock. We might as well start. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including a limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. To read the full notice of your rights and protections, please go to www.boston.nin_NPO_DISCRIMINATION. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with the raise hand button at the bottom, or the reaction button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you are on the phone, you can raise your hand using star 9. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Stella Jordan via the chat box at sjordan@ctps.org or call her at 857-702-3675. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Stella Jordan of the MPO staff at sjordan@ctps.org or 857-702-3675. First item on the agenda is introductions. I'm David Muller, I represent Secretary Fiandaca here. Please call the roll.
Mass DOT seat 2.
This is John Bouchard representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present.
Mass DOT highway.
John Romano, Mass DOT Highway here.
MBTA.
Good morning, this is Allie Clayman representing Interim General Manager Jeff Gonaville and the MBTA.
Massport.
I do not see Sarah Lee.
Okay. MAPC Vice Chair.
Good morning. This is Eric Barraza with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
MBTA Advisory Board.
Morning, everyone. Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board. Happy to be here.
Advisory Council.
Here.
I think I heard you, Len.
Yes, came in just as you said my name. Leonard Diggins here.
Great, thank you. City of Boston BTD.
Bill Conroy, representing Mayor Wu in the city of Boston.
City of Boston BPDA.
Chip Fitzgerald with BPDA representing Mayor Wu in the city of Boston.
At-large city, City of Everett.
Morning, Jay Monty, representing Mayor DiMaria in the city of Everett.
At-large city, City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozis, representing Mayor Fuller in the city of Newton.
At-large town, Town of Arlington.
I'm not seeing any representatives from Arlington.
Okay, thank you. At-large town, Town of Brookline.
Not seeing any representatives from Brookline.
Okay. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Ballantyne in the Intercore.
Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning, Austin City Notes, Town of Acton, representing the Magic Subregion.
Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giambetti, representing Metro West Region, and Mayor Charles Ziski.
North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Not seeing Darlene Nguyen yet.
Okay. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
Not seeing Melissa Tintopoulos.
Okay. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hall.
Hi, Donna Purcell, Select Board Chair, Town of Hull.
Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Medway.
I do not see Peter Pelletier.
Okay. And Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood, Neponset River Regional Chamber.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Trek subregion.
Okay. And our ex officio members, Federal Highway Administration.
Good morning, Ken Miller, Federal Highway.
And Federal Transit Administration.
Not seeing any representatives from Federal Transit Administration.
Okay. Then I believe that calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the chair's report. I don't have one today, so we'll go directly to the executive director's report. And I believe Annette, you're subbing in for Tegan, or is it Gina?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few items. So one is staffing updates. Next slide, please. We are still recruiting for the 4 open positions listed here: manager of MPO activities, manager of planning and policy, manager of multimodal planning and design, and program manager for the long range transportation plan. We have been receiving some applications and we've begun interviewing for some of these positions, but we would appreciate your help in continuing to help us spread the word on these open positions. So I just wanted to go over briefly some of the things we're going to be talking about today. We have one action item, which will be first, and Sam Taylor will be presenting the transit safety performance targets along with representatives from the RTAs. And we will be asking you to vote to endorse those transit safety targets. And then we have 2 presentations. The first is from Bradley Putnam, who will be presenting staff's proposal for the investment programs to be included in Destination 2050. And then finally, Ethan Lapointe will be presenting the preliminary project programming scenarios for the FFY's 2024 to 28 TIP. And then finally, as a reminder, the next MPO meeting, which is the 4th this month, thank you very much for all your participation, is scheduled for March 30th. For that meeting, we have a few potential agenda items, which will be the discussion of the FFY's 2024-28 TIP final project programming scenario, and then an amendment to the FFY 2023 UPWP. And that's it, Mr. Chair. Oh, also, I'm sorry, there will be a UPWP committee meeting following the March 30th MPO meeting at 1 o'clock.
Thank you, Annette. Any questions for Annette? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment at this time? If so, please raise your hand. And let me get to. All right, let's start with Wig Zamor, because I think I saw your hand first, Wig. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, hi, Wig Zamor from Somerville. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks very much. Just wanted to make 2 brief comments. I had a chance to glance at some of the drafts of the conformity documents, and they look beautiful, but I just would urge you to continue to give them a scan for readability for people who may have challenges in reading things. I think some of the kind of fainter artistic fonts may be a challenge for some people. So that's the end of that comment. I just hope you can do that. I know years ago, we revised all of the MPO documents to be highly readable, 12-point font or greater. The second thing I want to mention is that it would be very helpful over the intermediate term to be able to make available the output of the MOVES model with regard to pollutants. The FAA has been doing with local research scientists very granular analysis of aviation noise and aviation ultrafine particles. As you may or may not know, ultrafines are now regulated for jet engines. I think it will be not long before ultrafine particles are regulated for surface transportation. they cause much more serious and much steeper health effects gradients than regional pollutants like PM 2.5. So if the data that you kick out from your models, they're not, they're not measured like the research we do with the CAFE project and the research universities here, but they are pretty good. And if they could be reduced to census block group level, as the FAA science is now done by Matt Simon and others, that would give us a really good opportunity to look directly at environmental justice disparities, which we cannot do in the absence of those pollutants. Thank you very much for that opportunity.
Thank you, Wick. And on that issue, why don't you reach out to Tegan directly when she's back from her honeymoon?
Okay, terrific. Thanks.
Thank you. Steve Olenoff.
Hi, I wanted to speak for the town of Westwood on the Canton Street Sidewalk Project, the Complete Street project. And Westwood hasn't had anything on the tip in quite a few years, I would say over 20 or 22 years. We've had a number of complete street projects and Safe Route to School project we had, but nothing right on the tip. So this is the first one in a while. It's taking Canton Street, which is a very old street, ancient way, and it's a 2-lane with absolutely no sidewalks the entire length of the street, and it's going to provide for pedestrians to make it into a complete street while trying maintaining the look and feel as much as you can of this old street. In other words, rather than widening the street and putting in bicycle lanes, there's going to be a sidewalk, a 5-foot sidewalk on one side and a 10-foot multi-use path on the other, so you can safely get the bicycles off the street and provide for pedestrians. So as they say, full disclosure here, I happen to live in the neighborhood, and when I go out for a walk, I like to walk around the block. I can't do that because that would mean me walking on Canton Street, and I won't do it. It's just too dangerous for me to even walk on Canton Street. I have to find other ways, or I have to, when I reach Canton Street, I have to reverse. So this would do that. It would connect, well, there's another project for the sidewalk. So in Westwood, the sidewalks here, sidewalks there, this would make a big connection with University Station. Those sidewalks, people in the neighborhood could come and go there, and it would connect to the other sidewalks. It would connect to the Islington Village section of the town. It's all part of what's coming together in Westwood, is connecting all these sidewalks together. Now, I noticed on the descriptions, it said it's from the East Street Rotary to, not end, to University Ave. It was a little unclear. And looking at the scenarios, I noticed it was funded on the second scenario, not on the first. And then on the third scenario today, it wasn't listed at all. So I don't know what happened on that. It should be listed. And that one is for cost effectiveness, and there's seems to be a problem in the calculation that was listed in the other handout for today on cost effectiveness. First of all, the included in the project is a bridge deck replacement, which we were asked by MassDOT to include this in the project, and the town is happy to do that, but that's about $4 or $5 million. So the project itself is really worth about $14-15 million, and it's 2 miles long. So that's like $7.5 million per mile. It's listed as 29 million per mile. So that's a big difference that needs to be corrected on what the cost effectiveness is that. And I would think that would make it eligible because it's much more cost effective than anything else that I saw on the list. So I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone has, anything they want to ask.
Thanks, Steve. Next item, I'm sorry, next person up is Bill Renault.
Good morning, folks. Bill Renaud, Wakefield's town engineer, here to provide some comment on our downtown revitalization project. I'm also joined on the meeting by our design consultant, VHB. The town is excited to see the project programmed within the fiscal 28 scenarios 2 and 3 of the draft TIP. Our complete street project will provide much needed multimodal access between Wakefield's downtown business district and some recreational activities being held at Lake Quinnipiac, a great pond in town. Project proposes to construct portions of the Mystic Highland Greenway within the project and provide connection to the Wakefield and Linfield Rail to Trail project that is under design as well. The community is overwhelmingly supportive of the project in public meetings and with design funding at a couple of different town meetings. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the project and urge you to support the project. And that's about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Bill or Steve? Seeing none. If you have a question later in the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next up is committee chairs reports. Derek Pravat.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind members that the UPWP committee will be meeting this afternoon at 1 p.m. We'll be getting a first look at the survey results that came through for study ideas for the fiscal year 2024 Unified Planning Work Program. So everybody is welcome to attend and looking forward to seeing folks there. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions for Derek? Seeing none. Any other committee chair reports at this time? Jay Monty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a reminder that next Thursday, the 23rd, 9 a.m., we're having a congestion management committee. We still have 2 seats vacant on the committee. So if anybody would like to step up, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Next item on the agenda is the Regional Transportation Council Advisory Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so we have not had a meeting since our last meeting here. And we are having a special meeting on the 22nd so that we can chime in on the scenarios. Looking forward to it. Everyone's welcome to join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Next item is the minutes of February 16th. Can I get a motion in a second from a member to approve the minutes, and please state your name for the record. Eric Barassa.
Good morning, Eric Barassa. I'm making a motion to approve the February 16th MPO meeting minutes.
Thank you, Eric. Brian Kane.
I am always happy to second any of Eric's motions.
Thank you, Brian. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing and hearing none, please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Siganowitz,
Austin Siganowitz abstains.
Dennis Giambetti, okay, I'll come back. Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn votes yes.
Donna Purcell,
Donna Purcell, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
okay, and is Dennis Giambetti here to vote?
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Okay, thank you. That calls the roll, Mr. Chair. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is transit safety performance targets. Sam Taylor and Michael Katsos.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Taylor, and I am the Performance-Based Planning and Programming Manager at CTPS. The following presentation is on the 2023 State Fiscal Year Transit Safety Performance Targets. I will be delivering the bulk of this presentation, though we have Mike Katsos of MBTA's SMS and Safety Oversight Division to deliver MBTA's performance targets today. Next slide, please. The FTA requires transit agencies to create safety plans to implement safety management systems, or SMS. Transit agencies and MPOs must set performance targets for federal transit safety measures. Mike Katsos of MBTA, who I just mentioned, will speak more to the MSS process. The recommendation of MPO staff is that the board vote to adopt the transit safety targets for the Boston region, and the MPO can consider transit safety performance as part of reviewing capital programming for the Transportation Improvement Program. Also, a memo and copies of agency safety plans are available on the MPO meeting calendar where you access this meeting. Next slide, please. As with past sets of performance targets, I will provide a brief overview on performance-based planning and this year's target setting cycles. I will then give an overview on the transit safety performance measures, which the board will vote on after this presentation. And then Mike Katsos of MBTA will take over and present the MBTA transit safety targets for 2023. After the MBTA targets, we will present targets for the other two RTAs, CADA and the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. Following that, we will address a few opportunities for improving transit safety. And as always, there will be time for questions prior to the requested action, which is the vote on the 2023 targets. Next slide, please. You may have seen this graphic in past presentations about federal target setting. As a reminder, these targets are set annually. Transit safety is the final set of 3 annual targets that the board has been asked to adopt. And transit safety targets must be set by the end of the current TIP development cycle. Next slide, please. There are a few resources for more information on performance-based planning as it relates to today's presentation. The performance page on the MPO's website has current information about measures, targets, and other details about the MPO's performance-based planning and programming activities. The archive page lists targets from previous years. To learn more about these federally required performance measures and targets, please check out the MPO's current Transportation Improvement Program, particularly Chapter 4, which is the Performance Analysis chapter. Additionally, information about the Commonwealth's performance and related targets is available, and you can view that on MassDOT's tracker website, which is massdottracker.com. Next slide, please. Federal legislation includes specific mandates to strengthen the safety of transit systems. Under the Federal Transit Administration's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan Rule, applicable transit agencies are required to develop safety plans that define how these agencies will implement safety management systems, or SMS. In the agency's safety plans are the performance targets for federally required measures. The MPO then sets transit safety targets for their regions, and the MPO considers transit capital programming in the context of transit safety performance. Next slide, please. This diagram outlines different actors' roles in developing transit safety targets. The U.S. Department of Transportation establishes measures on transit assets for various safety measures. Then regional transit agencies set targets on measures by mode. For our region, the relevant transit agencies are the MBTA, CADA, and MWRTA, as you can see in the blue middle box. And after RTAs set their targets, the MPO works with the agencies to set or revisit regional targets. Next slide, please. So there are 7 federally required measures in these 4 categories: fatalities, injuries, safety events, and system reliability. For 3 categories, fatalities, injuries, and safety events, the desired outcome is lower metrics. But for system reliability, which is measured as vehicle revenue miles per major mechanical failure, the desired outcome are greater metrics, or a greater VRM between failures. Mike Katsos will go into more specifics as part of this presentation. And I also must note that supporting information is in the aforementioned memo in Table 1 on page 4. Next slide, please. On transit safety targets in general, targets reflect a 1-year time frame. They are based on transit agencies' modes, past data, local contexts, and planned policies, investments, and strategies. They do not result in FTA rewards or penalties for transit agencies, states, or MPOs. And when proposing regional targets, MPO staff incorporated targets from the transit agencies and also listed MBTA, CADA, and MWRTA targets separately as their target setting approaches varied. And at this time, I will turn over the presentation to Mike Katzos, who will present MBTA's 2023 target set transit safety targets.
All right. Thank you, Sam, and good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Katzos, Director of SMS and Safety Oversight with the MBTA Safety Department. I think that was an excellent introduction to the conceptual underpinnings of this safety target development process. I would reiterate that there's a lot of value in looking into the memos that were prepared and some of the supporting documents about these targets, how they were developed, how they tie in with a lot of our other safety activities as an organization. So just to quickly run through the targets for 4 modes, 4 MBTA modes governed by our transit safety plan and subject to federal requirements for development of these targets, beginning with bus. So as with
Hey Mario, how you doing? Hello.
As with our other modes, we've set up.
Can everybody else mute their phones, their volume, please? Mike is trying to make his presentation. Thank you. Sorry, Mike.
No problem. So we've set a target fatality rate for 2023 at 0 for all of our modes. That's a methodology that's consistent with FTA's expectation and obviously our desire to keep fatalities at 0. For injuries on the bus side, we have set a target of 286 or a rate per million vehicle revenue miles of 12.23. Safety events, 98 or a rate of 4.21 per million vehicle revenue miles. And that mean mileage between major mechanical failures, which Sam had talked about, the one target which we look to drive up each year, that value is 29,500 for bus. On our next slide, we have a recap of past performance. Again, our transit safety plan was issued in late 2022 based on the latest 3 full years of safety performance data, so spanning 2019 to 2021. The values you see on this slide are the cumulative tallies across the entire 3-year period, just to give a little perspective on what we're looking at here. So in that 2019 to 2021 period, we had 3 total fatalities on bus for a rate of 0.05, above our target rate of 0. For injuries, we had 875, so approximately 300 per year for a rate of 12.48. For safety events, 300 total or approximately 100 per year. And system reliability came in just below 30,000 miles at 29,099. Next slide, please. Heavy and light rail covered on this side. You can see again those fatality targets set at 0. For heavy rail, our target injury rate 7.99, which equates to a total of 180 expected across that 2023 period. For light rail, injury rate of 14.35 or 79 across that period. Safety events, our target of 24 for heavy rail, 27 for light rail. And you can see based on the mileage of each of those modes that we typically accrue throughout the year, while the total values are similar, the rates are somewhat different. So looking at 1.07 per million vehicle revenue miles on heavy rail and 4.94 on the light rail. For reliability, target rate of 44,500 for heavy rail and 7,650 on the light rail. Next slide, please. All right, looking back at that past 3-year period for both of these modes, we did have 1 fatality on heavy rail between 2019 and 2021 that met the reporting criteria here. 0 fatalities for light rail during that same period. Across the 3-year period, approximately 552 injuries on heavy rail, 242 on light rail, for rates 8.16 on heavy rail and 14.64 on light rail. The total number of safety events during that period, 74 on heavy rail, 84 on light rail. And you can see that those rates slightly above where we have set the target this year, a 2% reduction in those rates that we're seeking. System reliability within that period, and there is some variability here. It can be somewhat dramatic depending on rollout of new vehicle equipment, maintenance-related campaigns, a lot of other environmental factors. The reliability that we achieved on heavy rail during that period was 43,713 miles between major mechanical failures, and for light rail, 7,515. I'm going to close with a discussion of paratransit. We had 0 fatalities on paratransit in that 2019, excuse me. We're looking at the targets here for 2023, but we have set that rate at 0, consistent with the other modes. Injuries for paratransit in 2023, we've set the target rate at 2.27, or a total of approximately 27. Safety event rate of 1.74, or approximately 20 total reportable safety events. And system reliability, which is historically quite high on paratransit, we set that target rate at 62,500. In looking back at the past performance, where some of those targets were derived from, we do have 0 fatalities across that 2019 to 2021 period, 82 injuries total, meeting our criteria across that period for a rate of 2.31 per million vehicle revenue miles, approximately 62 safety events for a rate of 1.77 per 1 million vehicle revenue miles, and system reliability sitting just above 60,000 miles at 61,231. That is it for me. I'm going to hand it back to Sam, and I will be available for any questions at the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Mike. Next slide, please. So the charts in the next 4 slides will look similar to those that Mike presented for MBTA. The transit safety targets for CADA are shown here. CADA also follows the state fiscal format that MBTA does. They use the same vehicle revenue miles value for rates, which is 1 million VRM. So fatalities are set to 0. Injuries and safety events are expected to be limited, with just 2.5 events on fixed routes and 1.5 events on demand response trips. System reliability values are in the range of recent estimates. In general, CADA used past data and averages as the basis for determining its transit safety performance targets. When CADA set its targets, it reviewed data for years when injuries or safety events did take place and used those values as a basis for setting its injury and safety event rate targets for state fiscal year 2023. And these targets are shown in table 5 on page 10 of the memo. Next slide, please. Past safety performance for 2018 to 2022 is shown here for CADA. During this period, there were no fatalities and only limited injuries. There were 12 safety events on the fixed route system, averaging out to 2.4 events per year. There were 6 safety events on demand response trips, averaging out to 1.2 events per year. And there were fewer mechanical failures on average for demand response trips, with a mean of 133,848 vehicle revenue miles traveled per major mechanical failure. Next slide, please. Like CADA, MWRTA set targets by state fiscal year as well. What's different here is that MWRTA used a different rate denominator, or 100,000 VRM rather than 1 million. Fatalities are set to 0. Injuries and safety events are expected to be limited, and system reliability values are in the range of recent estimates, about 75,000 vehicle revenue miles per major mechanical failure for both modes. MWRTA considered safety-related data that it reports to MassDOT annually when setting targets and sought to set targets that are attainable. And these targets are presented in page 7 on page 12 of the memo. Next slide, please. Past safety performance from 2018 to 2022 is shown here. Again, MWRTA used a different rate denominator from 1 million, instead using 100,000 VRM. During this period, there were no fatalities and only limited injuries. There were 7 safety events on fixed route systems, averaging out to 1.4 events per year. And there were 8 safety events on demand response trips, averaging out to 1.6 events per year. And there were fewer mechanical failures on average for fixed route trips, with a mean of 128,551 VRM traveled between major mechanical failures. Next slide, please. Now that we have more information about transit safety and proposed targets, what are the overall processes that support transit safety improvements? One strategy is through MassDOT's capital improvement program, which allocates federal and state dollars to CIP programs that support MBTA and RTA asset improvement. The CIP also considers asset condition and potential improvements when scoring candidate projects for the CIP. The MPO also considers MBTA and RTA investments when they are presented for inclusion in the upcoming 2024 to 2028 TIP. MPA staff have been coordinating with the region's transit agencies to discuss the kinds of projects that the transit modernization program may support. And the criteria for safety in the transit modernization program currently mirrors criteria used by MassDOT. There are opportunities to refine as specific projects are programmed there. The criteria also supports safety for multimodal users of roadways and supporting connections to transit systems, which may help improve safety for transit customers. Next slide, please. And to conclude, given today's presentation of the targets, MPO staff requests that the Boston Region MPO move to support the staff recommended set of state fiscal year 2023 transit safety targets. After adoption of the targets, the MPO incorporates updated transit safety targets and information on how planned investments affect transit safety performance into the 2024 to 2028 TIP. The deadline for adopting these targets is March 31st. And with that, this presentation has concluded, and we will open up the floor to questions.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Mike. Questions from the members? Brian Kane.
Thanks, David. I have a couple of questions. Well, one question and 2 requests. I'll start with the requests first. So Mike and folks from the T and through you, David, can the MBTA also bring its railroad commuter rail safety targets, which are through a separate federal entity, I know, through the Federal Railroad Administration, but just for the purposes of holistic understanding on behalf of the MPO and its member communities? Could the T bring those forward? It doesn't have to be a presentation. I would just request through you, David, that those be provided so that we can get a holistic approach of sort of the T's understanding of safety. I think ferry is done by the Coast Guard, and that's a little more convoluted, but if it's readily available, I'd love to see ferry as well. Related to that, my question is, through you again, David. Mike, I don't know if you have the breakouts of both the targets and the actuals for the last 3 years by mode breakout, either by line or by vehicle type. Same for bus. I'd appreciate seeing that. I hope that the Blue Line reliability centered maintenance is continuing to work and keep those numbers down relative to red, some of which date from when men first walked on the moon. So I'd be very curious to see that breakout by vehicle type, and if not, at least by mode. And the same is true on light rail. I'd like to see Mattapan broken out relative to Green Line. And if we can do Green Line 7, 8, 9, I would love to see what the Type 9's MMDF is and hope that it is better than the 7s and the 8s. I certainly hope it's better than the 8s. Probably not better than the 7s. The 7s are great. And I guess my final request, David, is again to you and through you. I guess this is more of a global request. Going forward, when we talk about T, and I'm only focusing on the T here because that's my bailiwick. This also applies to CADA and Metro West. When funding requests are brought forward to the MPO that relate to vehicle procurements or vehicle maintenance or anything related to funding, fixing, maintaining assets, can these targets be referenced in those requests and some analysis given to us to help us try and understand the relationship between those investments and achieving these targets or not achieving these targets? I think you know what I'm saying. Just so that we can begin to make those connections in our own heads about this helps yield results on that. Thank you.
You're welcome, Brian. So I think Mike was shaking his head as you were asking for those requests. So Mike, if there's anything that Brian's requested that it ends up you can't give Brian, please work with Brian and let me know what you can't give him and why you can't give it to him.
Sure, I do believe that we can provide most of the information requested. Certainly the breakdowns by line and by mode. We have that readily available. We should be able to collect the information about the performance of some of the different fleets within each line as well. And that's an excellent comment about, supporting the spending related decisions with information on the targets and some of the expected improvements. That is precisely the direction that we've been looking to go, using the data analysis to support a lot of these higher level decisions, actively driving down fatalities, injuries, in-service failures, using that informed investment approach. So we can definitely provide what you need.
Excellent. So Mike, when you provide it, can you send it to Sam, and Sam will just, I said provide it to Brian, but I meant to provide it to the MPO, and Sam will send it out to everybody because I'm sure it's not just Brian who's interested. Thank you, Mike. Then Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I really appreciate seeing the transit plan that you included, and so the transit safety plan. So this is probably a little bit out of scope, but I'm trying to get a handle on where would we, as an MPO and even the Right Oversight Committee, be able to see what the T is doing in order to avoid something like happened this weekend where we have a system-wide slowdown. And it seems to me that it was related to not being able to produce documents regarding, safety work that had been done. That's the other question.
Thank you. I think you froze at the end, Len.
Oh, okay. So where did you lose me?
We heard you talking about what happened this weekend and the lack of documentation.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Yeah. I guess the question kind of strung out, meaning I petered out. So that's pretty much it. I'm trying to understand like where can we? It's not in one of the safety categories that we see here. But given that the transit plan does talk about the maintenance of documentation, I'm just wondering, where is it that we can make sure that the T is doing what it needs to do, so that we don't have these kinds of occurrences. And like I said, I can understand status scope and maybe a question not prepared for, but if you happen to have some insights, I'd appreciate it.
Mike?
Well, I will say, we are actively working as an entire organization to push more detailed information about things like what happened over the weekend, some of the other issues that are of interest, obviously, to stakeholders across the whole region. These targets are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of looking at the full granular picture of safety and how things play out day to day across the operation. And so we are coordinating with executive leadership, with our communications teams to push as much of that relevant information out in a timely manner, connect the right people with the information that they need.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. That's it,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mike.
Chair, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can I get a motion and second from a member to adopt the targets as presented today? And please state your name for the record. Leonard Diggins.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adopt the safety targets.
Thank you. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
and Sarah Lee is here now from Massport.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for the late arrival. I vote yes.
Thank you. Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Can I vote yes now?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kosis, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Siganowicz, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Donna Purcell,
Donna Purcell, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Okay, that calls the roll, Mr. Chair. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the LRTP investment program proposal. Bradley Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bradley Putnam. I'm the interim program manager for the MPO's long-range transportation plan. Today, I'd like to speak about proposed updates to the MPO's investment programs in the long-range plan that's now under development, Destination 2050. There's more details on these proposals in a memo that is posted to the MPO's meeting website. Next slide, please. So today, after I speak, I would like to ask members for their feedback on these proposals for investment programs in Destination 2050. Do members support the programs as proposed, or would members like to see any changes to these proposals? Based on feedback from members, then staff can make modifications to proposals as needed, and then staff can go on to propose allocation of funding across investment programs. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, this discussion about investment programs is part of the strategies portion of the Destination 2050 development, in which investment programs from the previous long-range plan can be revisited, and the establishment of investment programs will allow for progress onto the next phase of developing the plan, which will be to allocate funding to investment programs. Next slide, please. So this slide gives an overview of the timeframe of the long-range plan. It'll go from 2024 to 2050. And the yellow box in the middle of the slide shows that the investment programs would cover the entire length of the planning horizon. There will also be projects that will need to be programmed in the long-range plan. Those projects would only be for the first 10 years of the plan, as shown by the green boxes on this slide, through the year 2033. There would be no projects planned beyond 2033, but the investment programs, the yellow box, would span the entire length of the plan. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, these are the investment programs in the current long-range plan that the MPO adopted in 2019, Destination 2040. Those programs are complete streets, community connections, intersection improvements, transit modernization, bicycle network pedestrian connections, and major infrastructure. Next slide, please. And as a reminder, these are the funding allocations that the MPO made in the 2019 plan, Destination 2040. The largest allocation was to complete streets at 45% of discretionary funding. The next was to major infrastructure at 30%, followed by intersection improvements at 13%, bicycle network and pedestrian connections at 5%, transit modernization at 5%, and community connections at 2%. Next slide, please. So in preparing to review proposals for changes to investment programs in Destination 2050, the new long-range plan, Staff engaged in a variety of activities, including reviewing laws, plans, policies, and needs, including specifically the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed by Congress and signed by the president. Staff consulted with MPO members, including at an MPO member workshop that was held in January. Staff reviewed and collected additional stakeholder input, including from sub-regional meetings, from stakeholder organization events, and from a public survey that went out that was available from November 2022 through January 2023. Staff also consulted project proponents and implementing agencies. Next slide, please. So staff would propose to continue these investment programs in Destination 2050. Complete streets, intersection improvements, bicycle network and pedestrian connections, major infrastructure, which would include projects that were based on policies that this board voted to adopt in 2020 after the adoption of the previous long-range plan in 2019, and community connections, with the caveat that some project types could potentially migrate to other programs over time. And staff would propose that all of these programs on this slide be funded for the entire length of the plan from 2024 through 2050. Next slide, please. Staff would propose creating a new investment program for bike share support. This program could provide dedicated funding for regional bike share capital needs, including system expansion and the possible replacement or upgrade of existing stations. And this could be informed by a long-term capital plan. This investment program could be funded somewhere in the range of $2 million to $5 million. CMAQ funding could potentially be used for system expansion, and other funding sources such as the Surface Transportation Block Grants could potentially be used to support infrastructure replacement. This program was proposed by staff at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. MAPC serves as the regional coordinator for Blue Bikes, the regional bike share program. Currently, the MPO funds bike share investments out of its Community Connections program. And so if the MPO were to create a new bike share support investment program, then potentially the bike share spending that's currently in the Community Connections program could be migrated over to this new bike share support program. Next slide, please. And then the last program is transit. The Transit Modernization Program was first established as part of Destination 2040, the long-range plan that the MPO adopted in 2019. The premise of the program was to flex MPO funds for transit maintenance and modernization projects in coordination with partner agencies. Next slide, please. So the Transit Modernization Program was intended for the sorts of projects in the blue box on this slide, such as accessibility improvements or station modernization or parking improvements. The first official year of the Transit Modernization Program is federal fiscal 25. However, the tip for 2023 through 27 did include 2 of these sorts of projects, improvements at Lynn Station and improvements at Forest Hills Station. Next slide, please. So MPO members gave some feedback about transit funding by the MPO. Members thought the project should be informed by the needs of transit agencies and by the MPO community, and by the goals set by the MPO, by transit agencies, and by the state as a whole. And members are interested in transformative transit projects, ways to improve access to transit, electrification of transit, and bus-related infrastructure improvements. Next slide, please. And so in response to that feedback, staff would propose that for the first 5 years of the plan, 2024 through 2028, that the MPO continue to fund specific investments under the existing transit modernization program. But the beginning in 2029, the MPO could establish a broader transit transformation program that could be informed by program planning conducted through the UPWP and other MPO activities. Next slide, please. So in the blue box towards the bottom of this slide, you can see the proposed transit transformation program could potentially include projects for station or facility investments that cost less than $50 million. The reason why it'd be less than 50 million is because a project that's greater than 50 million could be funded under the major infrastructure program at the bottom of this slide. But the transit transformation program could also potentially fund multimodal access improvements near stations or electrification projects or transit customer amenities such as bus shelters. This slide also shows that there are a variety of ways in which the MPO can continue to fund transit, whether or not in the transit transformation proposed investment program For example, transit signal priority could be part of any of a number of projects in multiple possible investment programs. Next slide, please. So as a summary, staff would propose that the MPO maintain its investment programs in complete streets, intersection improvements, major infrastructure, bicycle network and pedestrian connections, and community connections. Staff would propose that the MPO add a bike share support investment program, and staff would propose that the MPO broaden its existing transit modernization program into a transit transformation program starting in 2029. Next slide, please. So again, back to the beginning, would members support these programs as proposed, or would members like to propose any changes to these programs? And then in response to feedback, staff can make modifications to these proposals as necessary, and then staff can propose allocation of funding across investment programs. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any questions?
Then Diggins.
Yes, I did raise my hand prematurely, but I'm happy to go now. Anyways, you know, I like to propose new programs very much. You know, yeah, on the second one, you had me at the word transformation. You know, but I like where you're headed there. You know, and I think as I'm sure a lot of you've heard me say it, and I really would like to see our whole transportation network become a transit and freight network. So this is the next step in the process, and some of the elements that you have in there, you know, are very appealing to me, especially the shared models, you know, for trying to reduce the use of single occupancy vehicles. So yeah, I'm very happy with this. My only concern, and I brought this up at the last meeting when I asked about when we're going to see the needs assessment, is that we are kind of making this decision, or these decisions, without most of us having seen the results of the needs assessment. I trust you all, you know, that you're working on it. I know you're working on it, but that you are using what you know is in that, you know, to help guide the decisions here. But just as the board, we don't have that yet, and so it's just a part that's missing for us in being able to say what we should adopt. That's it. Thank you.
Jay Monty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Brad. And I just want to second Len's comments. It's great to see these two added categories. I think the transit and the bike are things several of us have wanted to see for quite a while. So thank you. I guess my question is mostly with regard to the transit transformation program. One is, you know, from a project proponent standpoint, is there a sense of whether these will be projects, you know, proposed by cities and towns, i.e. bus lanes, things of that nature? Maybe a new stop on the commuter rail could be, it's probably more than 50 million, but if that was something a community wanted, would the community be proposing that? How would that work with the T in terms of coordination, and maybe some of these projects will be proposed by the T. So that's just something that maybe you haven't figured out yet, but we ought to be thinking about. And the other question was just, you picked FY 2029 as a starting year. Just curious why that year. Of course, that's not to say that you couldn't have transit projects sooner than that, but just curious why we're waiting 6 years or 5 years to do that.
So
I think that was a question.
Yeah, so with regard to 2029, I think the idea was that the TIP that's currently under development, 2024 through 2028, would operate under the existing program, rather than making a change in the midst of the TIP development process. So then the next TIP could potentially include a new program. And then, so how to propose a project, I'd have to get back to you on the details on that. I believe it would be a collaboration between municipalities, MBTA, and other interested parties. And I think there'd be flexibility depending on the project to propose it under one of a number of possible investment programs. But I don't know if any other staff on the call would have anything else to add to that.
So I guess if I just one thing on the 2029 piece, I guess I just note that, you know, we were looking at some pretty big holes in the TIP over the next few years. And I think even today we're expecting perhaps the T is going to be here to propose some projects for the TIP to fill those holes. So I do think it's fine to add that to earlier TIP years, because I think we're going to find ourselves in position probably more than once in the next 5 years. But that's just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Ryan King.
Thanks, David. I have the same question as Jay on project proponents. So Bradley, great presentation. Just put me down as a +1 on that. You know, who can ask for these things? Presumably the T will have to be involved in doing some estimating. But I know there's lots of communities out there that I talk to that have station maintenance projects that would be well less than 50 million that they would love to apply for money for, but can't without the T because of flagging and all kinds of other issues. But that's not my main question. And this one is, as I want to do, a little broader. And David, I'm going to also look at you as I like to do.
As you're what to do.
As I want to do. So in the interest of transformation, how do we move from projects to a program? And let me explain what I mean. How do we incentivize or mandate that anything that this MPO funds have certain minimal requirements in it, such as pedestrian lighting or transit signal priority? And for instance, if we're going to give money to municipalities to upgrade their traffic signal systems, can we not begin the process of mandating that they be smart signals, not just for the T, but for police and fire? Can we do stuff through scoring or through project selection or through this LRTP visioning to require things like conduit for charging in all new sidewalks or streets that we put in, or bus charging along the way? Bridge heights. As the T moves to electrify its regional rail system, bridge heights are going to become a major issue where catenary can't go. And they're trying to work on this with battery. I get it. But if we could get ahead of it a little bit and say, this MPO will not fund bridge heights under a certain value that we work with the T to figure out what those heights are, won't that help us in the future not have to rebuild bridges that we've just rebuilt? So all of this is to say, as part of member feedback on the investment programs, what can we bake into them now that saves us money later? And what can we bake into them now that shows our real values and desires and requirements now to do what I completely agree with Len just said, putting transit first, putting pedestrianization first, putting bicycling first, moving people out of single occupancy vehicles, which I still believe is and should be our only goal. I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you.
So there was so much there, but it is hard for me to unpack. So certainly, I will just, rather than talk about the merits of what you propose, I will just answer, I think, what was the question. The MPO controls the MPO's money, right? So the MPO could certainly, as a decision, decide we're not going to fund, to use your first point, intersection improvements that don't include transit signal priority. Obviously, we're appropriate, right? There's a whole swath of communities in our MPO where there is no transit operating, right? So obviously we're appropriately. Smart signals, maybe everywhere. Yes, the MPO can make those decisions. You know, that comes with a cost. That comes with you know, there's always been a hesitancy here to mandate things on our cities and towns. So, but the MPO could set its own policies about what it is willing to fund and what it is not willing to fund. But that will increase the cost and reduce the number of projects. But that's, you know, they would, to your point, possibly be better, smarter, cost savings in the long run projects.
So just to follow up, David, how could the MPO do that? Through what mechanisms?
Well, so again, none of that is going to happen. Well, I can say none of that. I don't think any of that is going to happen this year, right? We're not going to look at the TIP projects and apply some policy that we didn't have. But the MPO could start discussing, you know, a whole host of policy issues and decide, tell people, tell our communities, this is our policy. If you bring something that doesn't comply with this policy, your chances of getting funded are slim to none. Right? And that would have to be, we would have to adopt policies at a meeting, at a public meeting with public discussion. And then we would have to agree to live by those policies because, like all boards, you can adopt a policy and then you can ignore your policy.
Right, but as we're looking at 2029 projects now through this process, is this not the way to do that? And if it's not, I don't want to hold everything up here, but I just want to understand what we can do so that if projects that we fund for 2029, 2020, 2030, which we'll have to live with for until like 2060 in some cases, are just a little bit more headed in the direction I think we all want to head it to. All want it to head to. So, I'm asking you, you're the expert here. Just
right,
how do we do it?
Right. I guess the answer is yes, but okay. So like, let's talk about the transformation, the transit transformation projects or whatever we're calling them. I'm not good with acronyms. I'm not good with names, but the transit policies, the transit project set aside of whatever the number was. We could certainly, as part of the LRTP, define that program and define what types of projects we're willing to fund. And if, as an example, you or other members want to say, well, if you bring if the T brings a bridge project, we're not funding it unless it's got a height of whatever the appropriate height would be, right? That can happen easily as we're developing a program, right? We will set the parameters of what we're willing to fund under that program. Can we use the LRTP to make large decisions about, we won't fund any intersection that doesn't have smart signals. We won't fund, and I think these are some of your examples. We won't fund sidewalks and roadway projects that don't include cables and things for future electrification charging. We could do that. I don't know if the LRTP is the place to do that. I suppose we could, right? I mean, certainly, like I say, I can easily see it being done for the transit modernization program, or not modernization anymore, transformation program. We're announcing a new program. We should set the parameters about what it means, right? I suppose we could use the LRTP to start doing the other stuff if that's what the board wants to do.
Well, I guess just my last point is something that I would like for us to consider, and I will talk to my fellow board members. I don't really care what the vehicle is, and I no pun intended. I don't think you do either, as long as we get there. But I'm going to keep bringing this up because I think we, as an MPO, need to put our investments where our values are, and I don't know how to get there, but I want to get there. So thank you.
Yep. Eric?
Yeah, thank you. I'm interested, Brad, in if you all have done some thinking about sort of percentage of the target funds for these programs, because I think one of the challenges we have with particularly the transit modernization program as it stands today is I don't think we have enough funds for the T to bring something significant. I think that's been one of the challenges, is just that their needs are very, very high, and projects there, except for, like the example last year where we had these big sort of gaps of unprogrammed funds. We could fit some projects in there. So I'd be interested in what's the thinking on what would be the percentage of funds that would, I think, be an important thing to understand, because obviously, we're trying to balance a lot of different interests, right, at the MPO, and we're trying to balance a lot of municipal priority projects and some major infrastructure projects. So I think understanding that breakdown would be very helpful here.
Yeah, I'd be happy if anyone else can jump on this. I'd be happy to hear, but I believe the idea was that the members today could consider just what the programs could be. And then based on the determination of which programs you want to include then staff could go back and develop recommendations for which percentages to allocate to which programs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think that's an important thing to hear. I mean, I think you're hearing, I mean, MAPC, we absolutely support investments in transit modernization improvements, but if the program, you know, is at the expense of, you know, other priorities, that's the kind of conversation I think we're gonna have to have. So be very interested in more of the municipal members, their perspective, you know, on this. Thank you.
Yeah, but so it is a given, right? That any new program is at the expense of other priorities, right? Any expansion to a program is at the expense of other priorities. It is just the MPO makes a decision that the new program is worth reducing the allocations to other programs, or that increasing, you know, increasing funding for a program is worth it to our regional needs, right? I mean, so I have a question, Bradley. Both of these new programs seem to me to be rather geographically limited. So I think to get to one of Eric's points, right? How many of the 97 communities have Blue Bike?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's in the range of 13. Eric Barassa might be able to address that.
Yeah, that's about right now.
Right. So this carve out is a carve out for 13 communities. And then how many communities how many communities don't have transit service? I guess of the 97.
I believe a lot of towns are covered by either the MBTA or one of the regional transit authorities.
I'm talking about service though, brother. I'm not talking about being named within the MBTA service area. I'm talking about having actual service. And I take your point that you know, people use the MBTA central core regardless of whether there's service in their community. I understand that point, and that thank you. That's a very good point. But I would like to talk about this in more detail at some point. And I mean, I'm not opposed to this. MassDOT's not opposed to this, but they are very focused on some communities and not on others. And I have a question about the Blue Bikes thing. And again, I think they support it. Okay, but my question is it? You had said during your presentation that projects that currently compete for community connections would now be shifted over to that program. But that doesn't necessarily mean, I don't think, that you think we should reduce community connections funding, right? I mean, that's a discussion for another day.
That would be a discussion for another day, but yeah, it'd be up to the board. So you could keep community connections the way it is and choose to have funding a different program be slightly less to fund Blue Bikes. That would be up to you all to decide in the future.
Right, and one last thing, and then I'll call on other people again for more comments. The Blue Bikes thing is it's not for expansion, it's for replacement of aging infrastructure. Is that correct?
The proposal as written could be for either.
Okay, so there there's only 13 communities could be mitigated by the fact that you could expand into other communities under this program.
Potentially.
Okay. Right. Annette?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to remind the board that we did have some money set aside to hash out the details of what was at that point the transit modernization program. We did put that study on hold because we are now moving towards this transformation program. And so through that work program, we could work on what we want to include in the transit, get the names mixed up, transit transformation study.
Thank you. Brian?
Thanks, David. I guess just to push back a little bit on what you just said around number of communities, yes, there are 97 communities in the MPO, but not all have the same population. So I would suggest that maybe a better question would be what percentage of the MPO's population is within the 13 communities that have Blue Bikes, and what percentage of the MPO region's population takes the T as opposed to what number of communities, because as we know, as you know better than any of us, there's big differences in population between Boxford and Boston, for instance, which is not to say that we don't care about our smaller communities. They're incredibly important, but we also have to take into account where people actually live sometimes.
All right, I thank you, Brian. I would note that people live in Boxford. Jay Monty.
I grew up in Boxford, so I'll take that a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to, on the Blue Bikes subjects, I think, and I'll speak for the Blue Bikes Council because I sits in that council. The intent here, I think, is that to make the ability for any community that wants to be part of the system or have bike share, have that ability, and it's a tough lift for new communities right now to raise that funding to find the continued operating funds to support the system. But we have had some members join the system that are not contiguous to Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Everett, and Brookline. Salem joined a couple of years ago, and they're 10 miles out from the system. So certainly I could envision the Framinghams, the Brocktons, the Lawrences, Lowells, places where a lot of folks live but are not contiguous to the system could certainly take advantage of this. And on that point too, I would just note that we have categories in this today that are not available to all communities. I mean, major infrastructure being the obvious one, right? That most smaller communities aren't asking for a highway interchange in their backyard. So, we already kind of have some categories that may favor geographically some places over others. So that's on that topic. And I just wanted to add some thoughts to Brian's earlier comment about sort of how we think of these investments programmatically. And I wonder if the answer to that maybe is in our scoring system to some extent. I mean, just taking the example of a bridge, I mean, it's a pretty cut and dry question to the T as to whether bridge height is high, has enough clearance to for either electrification or if we were to have like double stack container trains and want that access into Worcester or some other part of the state. That's a pretty cut and dry question, and it could be that when we think about scoring, in addition to having a 1 through 10 score on something, there may be a yes or no box, right? That pertains to other region-wide or statewide goals, whether they be transit or housing or whatever these goals are that we wish to support. So that may be the easier way to go about it, but definitely worth more discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Jay. Tom Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would tend to lean towards keeping the blue bikes in the community connection program rather than carving out a few $1 million for that I do think is really only going to impact a smaller fraction of the overall MPO. I can't imagine any of the communities out in the Trick region using that or having need for it. And then I did have a question. Would communities receiving that type of funding be contributing their own funding as well, or would they be getting all the money from the MPO?
I don't know the details on that. I don't know if anyone else can assist with that.
Well, that would be again, like Brian's other question. I think that's sort of up to the MPO, right? Well, I should say it's all up to MassDOT, right? Because the MPO doesn't actually have any match money. MassDOT would either provide the match, or MassDOT would, consistent with what we do with community connections, require communities to take on more and more of the match. So I don't really know the answer yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, David Kozis.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the question I have, so we have been funding Blue Bikes expansions for years, right? It's been great. It's been a wonderful program. So I guess the question is this just a matter of shifting the same projects from one funding pot to another funding pot, or is the whole idea to make it easier somehow to select the Blue Bikes projects that come in, or to encourage them more somehow than under our current process, right? I guess, have there ever been any Blue Bikes requests that came in that were not funded that maybe would or could be funded more easily if we had a special dedicated program for them. So I'm just wondering about that. Thank you.
Eric, I think you have your hand up, and this was actually, I think, Bradley's had a proposal that was generated at MAPC. So do you want to talk about this? You got something else for your hand?
Yeah, I can respond to some of these questions. So yeah, we sort of introduced this concept, into the long range plan process, largely from conversations we've had with the Blue Bikes municipalities. And so I think there's a couple things going on. One is that a lot of the bikes in the stations now are 10 plus years old. And so that's sort of the useful life of a lot of this equipment. And there's going to be a need moving forward to start replacing a lot of the things that we already have. We don't have to go into the weeds on this issue, but for example, like the CMAQ funds, the feds have ruled like we can't use those for replacing things. So that kind of gets into some of the issues of like the different sort of federal formula funds on funding it. But definitely replacement is going to be something that the municipalities are going to have to be thinking about. There's still a need for expansion, both in the existing municipalities to kind of densify, as well as there's interest in other municipalities joining. And so the thinking was that having a program where there could be a set amount of funding that the system could anticipate over the course of 5 or 10 years, they could really do some capital planning about what the system's needs are going to be, both replacing as well as expanding the bikes in the stations. And the ask might be beyond what we're sort of, that could be like the entire community connections, program. So that was the concept of trying to separate those things out. And then I think the memo also says that the proposal could be that if there are other municipalities in the region that also want to fund bike share, there's beyond Blue Bikes, there's other types of bike share, that they could also come to the MPO and request something like that. I think that's what the memo says. And Brad, maybe you could speak to that. And then in terms of the cost issue, yes, the municipalities, put money into the system in different ways, particularly on the operations side. And then some of them, fund additional capital on top of that too, and have used more recently, like some of the ARPA funds that they've received. So there is local money going into this as well.
How much?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Did you find out?
Yes, yeah.
On capital, I don't actually. I just want to know, like,
on capital.
On capital, yeah.
Yeah, we could find out.
I'm just interested, since the MPO would fund the capital needs, but if cities and towns are funding capital needs, like just if you can find out, it's not a big deal to me, but
sure,
yeah, it's easily available. Thanks, Eric. Others? Okay, so Bradley, I think we can move to the next step. But help me, brother. What is the next step? Is staff going to recommend funding splits, or are you going to come to the MPO and say, here's a pie chart? What are the funding splits? Like what is the next step from the staff's perspective?
So the next step would be if you as a collective board feel that the proposed programs could be included in the plan, then staff could develop one or more funding scenarios, proposed splits, and that could be discussed at a future meeting for members to reach some kind of consensus on what they want the splits to be in the plan.
Well, so I don't think there's consensus yet that this is the right thing, but I think we can't get there until you do the next step anyway. So just assume that you should develop scenarios that fund all of these programs, and then we can have this discussion again about which is the appropriate amounts for which programs. And at the end of the day, if somebody zeroes it, if we end up zeroing out a program, then we will have undone what we did today. But I think we need to get to the money discussion, because it's sort of hard to do this without talking about Where's the money coming from? Since
Thank
the
you, Mr.
pie's
Chair.
not growing, we're just slicing, making more slices.
Yep, we'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Good job. All right, now the next item on the agenda is the discussion of the FFY 24 to 28 tip preliminary project programming scenarios. Ethan LaPointe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program Manager here with the MPO. Today's presentation, if we can go on to the next slide, is to provide a brief overview on the programming scenarios, namely what the tip will look like in terms of the substance of projects for fiscal years 2024 to 2028. We'll have a brief overview on the development timeline to date for the tip, along with some upcoming dates, a brief review on the public comments received by staff since the March 2nd MPO board meeting related to projects incorporated in these scenarios or potentially up for discussion, a review of initial funding scenarios, the next steps, namely, given that this is a preliminary discussion, what the later discussion this month at the March 30th meeting may look like, and then just discussing the projects in general. In advance of today's presentation, if we can go on to the next slide, there were a series of materials that staff had posted for resources. The MBTA projects will be discussed in further detail towards the tail end of this presentation, but staff have also compiled a packet of letters of support received by project proponents and other municipalities, agencies, and individuals. This also includes the tables for the 3 scenarios, which we'll be doing a deeper dive on shortly. And as a follow-on to the March 2nd MPO board meeting, where staff discussed project scoring, staff have also finalized project scores to incorporate the last bits of project proponent feedback and criteria performance against the scoring criteria there. A new and updated list of project scopes, scores, and summaries has been posted, in addition to an updated table of projects, their scoring and descriptions there. I should note there are no new projects on either of those tables, just updated scoring numbers and other items related to that process. If we go on to the next slide and the one after it, we can discuss the goal for today. This is really, today's presentation is to begin a discussion around the MPO's preferences for funding new projects. As a preliminary discussion, the feedback that the board provides here today will help to inform the additional tweaked scenarios that staff will then present at the March 30th meeting. The 3 that are being discussed today represent a foundation, and additional ones will come. If we go on to the next slide, we can really see, and the one after that, what the tip development timeline looks like. While I said that today's presentation is kind of a starting point for scenarios discussion, the fact of the matter is that tip development is coming down to the wire. After a final scenario is selected at the March 30th meeting, which will take in the feedback and the discussion from today, there will be less than a month expected before the draft tip is asked to be approved by the board for public release and comment, and that will happen at the April 20th MPO board meeting. We're getting close, with the long-term objective for endorsing the final tip still being June 1st, so not too far away. If we go on to the next slide, I'd like to provide a brief overview on 2 public comments received since the March 2nd MPO board meeting. Staff received 1 comment regarding 1 project that is currently incorporated in the scenarios up for discussion today. This is in a Blue Bikes expansion project for Medford, where this member of the public expressed their support for the project and desire to see this project funded. There was a second comment received from planning staff at the town of Acton on a federal fiscal year's 2022 funded community connections project for the Acton parking management system. This parking management system project was previously funded for $20,000 in fiscal year 2022 through the community connections program, but has to be reprogrammed in the amount of $15,000 in federal fiscal years 2024 in order for it to proceed due to staffing constraints by the municipality. It's my understanding that we may have some folks from the town of Acton and their planning team that may be able to speak to this a little bit further if any questions arise regarding this project specifically as part of the discussion phase at the end of this presentation. If we go on to the next slide, we can begin kind of reviewing a lot of the materials that have been presented at previous board meetings over these past few months. Starting off with a brief review of the scoring, staff scored 19 projects during this tip cycle, and the scenarios presented here today aim to program a subsection of them. These scenarios will primarily fund new projects in federal fiscal year 2028 based on recommendations from MassDOT engineering and planning personnel at the February tip readiness days. As we'll get to shortly, some of the projects that are incorporated in this presentation may be programmed sooner than fiscal year 2028 should their project readiness permit. The largest volume of scored projects for this year came from the Community Connections Funding Program, with 5 projects in complete streets, 2 in bicycle and pedestrian network connections, and 1 intersection improvement project. If we go on to the next slide, we can discuss specifically what came through for Community Connections. Of the 11 Community Connections projects, 3 sought to procure additional bicycle racks. 1 project was received under the Transit Signal Priority Project category for Lynn along Broad Street, and 4 applications were received seeking funding for shuttle and microtransit pilot operations. Among the 3 Blue Bikes projects received, 2 sought to procure electric Blue Bikes within the existing system with swappable batteries, namely Boston and Cambridge, with the 3rd project among those seeking to expand the existing pedal-powered system that is in Medford. If we move on to the next slide, we can refresh real quickly on a familiar slide that really provides the summary financial overview of the Community Connections program and ongoing obligations. This has often come up in a broader discussion around shuttle operations and projects there, but what this table shows is really how the ongoing obligations for these 3-year shuttle projects, how they factor against the MPO's approved set aside of $2.5 million a year for the Community Connections program. This means that for the scenarios today, a significant portion of that approved $2.5 million cap functionally was spoken for already when programming those new Community Connections projects. The scenarios presented here today reflect that set aside constraint, and the remaining $641,495 left to fund new projects in the fiscal year 2024 program. Staff are also keeping an eye towards the fiscal 2025 program as well, which will be for the next TIP development cycle, which currently has about $1,075,304 in it going into next year's cycle, and before accounting for any continuing obligations that may emerge from the scenarios programmed this year. For a brief overview on the overall financial summary and apportionments across all programs, if we go on to the next slide, we can see the aggregate funding level across each of the 5 years of the TIP, with fiscal year 2023 as a baseline. The focus here, given that it's the new year of the TIP, is generally fiscal year 2028, which has increased funding levels from initial budget projections for federal fiscal years 2023 to 2027 to the effect of about $158 million versus a general anticipation of about $138. This increase, as has been previously discussed in board meetings, was driven by the absence of payments on grant anticipatory notes, or GANs, debt service payments, in federal fiscal years 28, but also 27. In the case of fiscal year 27, that led to an additional apportionment of $16.8 million in that year, or approximately $155 million. That said, this picture only tells the story of the total amount of regional target funding available as a whole across the entire program, and does not account for any of the projects that have already been programmed against it, both current and new projects in the future. As I will discuss later in this presentation, the greatest funding bandwidth for new projects being evaluated in this year is found in fiscal years 24, 5, and 7, along with the money that was initially made available in fiscal year 28. This is due in large part, if we go to the next slide, on previous discussions that staff have had with the board and discussions therein regarding some of the updates resulting from MassDOT's TIP readiness days from early February. That funding availability was really driven by the readiness updates and discussions resulting from there. Early in staff, when these were discussed to the board back in the February 16th meeting, these updates were provided in more detail there in the materials there. But to summarize these updates briefly, this first table shows 3 projects that were not flagged for any changes specifically, but were flagged for some sort of risk level. Now, this is a developing scenario as the TIP is developed, and starting off actually in reverse order, I can provide good news that the 3rd project on this list, the Park and Pearl Street Reconstruction Project in Chelsea, which is programmed in federal fiscal year 2026, is actually ahead of schedule for its programming, and the initial coordination concerns that resulted in its flagging for presentation to the board have been discussed with relevant project proponents, and there should not be any coordination issues with the McCardle Street Bridge rehab in Boston, which is adjacent to the project limits in Chelsea here. The second project is the Bridge Street reconstruction project in Beverly, which again, there are no changes recommended for these projects at this time, but that project was seeing some concerns from MassDOT engineers surrounding utilities within the project area. Whereas the third project, or rather second on this list, is the Mount Auburn Street Rehabilitation Project in Watertown, which has funding between 2023 and 2024. That being said, the vast majority of the Mount Auburn Street Rehabilitation Project's budget is currently programmed in 2023 to the effect of approximately $24 million. And its advertising date falls at the very near end of the federal fiscal year. That being said, next week, MassDOT is holding a municipal priority of projects meeting for municipalities, project proponents, specifically to discuss projects like Bridge Street and Mount Auburn Street that are on track to advertise this fiscal year. So there may be additional updates coming from those future discussions. Moving on to the next slide, we can do a quick refresher on last week's MPO board meeting content with a discussion on the cost increases in Readiness Day's takeaway. This table is a repeat that shows the 4 projects currently in the TIP, all of which happen to be in federal fiscal year 2024, that witnessed cost increases beyond the designated cost review thresholds for the MPO of either $2.5 million or 25%. At last week's MPO board meeting, the board voted to continue to bring these projects forward and fund such increases included here. These projects were the Justice Cushing Highway project in Cohasset, the reconstruction of Foster Street in Littleton, the Independence Greenway extension in Peabody, and the I-495 Route 1A ramp reconfiguration project in Rentham. As discussed in greater detail last week, the primary driver for these cost increases was not only ongoing inflationary pressures on project materials, work scopes, and types, but also part of the project's maturing through the project design process and budgeting process, and critically, the incorporation of additional multimodal elements into the project scope to improve safety and accessibility for all users in that case. If we go on to the next slide for the last readiness update before we really delve into the scenarios here, these next 2 slides cover the 9 projects that were recommended for delay out of their currently programmed fiscal years, as was discussed at the February 16th MPO board meeting in light of recommendations from MassDOT's TIP readiness days. This included the delay of Ashland's Cherry Street rail crossing project to fiscal year 2025 as a result of coordination with rail operators along the corridor. The second project was a delay of the Boylston Street reconstruction project, which is a Boston project, out of 2024 into 2025, following the findings of a subsurface utilities assessment and the identification of the need for additional design public hearings. The Essex Street reconstruction project in Lynn was also recommended for a delay from fiscal year 24 to 25, given the readiness of the project design, as was also the case for the Independence Greenway extension in Peabody, following further review of right-of-way taking needs and environmental permits for culverts and drainage along the corridor. The final project recommended for delay out of fiscal year 2024 was Ipswich's Central and South Main Street project, which was recommended for a 2-year delay to fiscal year 2026 due to concerns surrounding utilities and right-of-way. We go on to the next slide, we can now discuss the non-fiscal year 2024 projects, starting off first with the Woburn Common project, which was recommended for a delay from fiscal year 26, from fiscal year 25 into 2026 due to design and readiness coordination. To jump ahead real quickly, the third project on this list is the Route 1 and University Avenue intersection improvements in Norwood, which was delayed back 1 year to a 2026 and 2027 funding spread for construction due to concerns surrounding utilities and wetlands. In addition, the Swampscott Rail Trail construction project was delayed from 2027 to 28 for similar concerns as well, along with public outreach. The second project on this list, and the fourth project for this table, was the Rutherford Avenue reconstruction project in Charlestown, which was initially recommended for a delayed start from fiscal year 2025 out to a new fiscal start year of 2028 due to design coordination and additional incorporation of items into the scope. The scenario presented here today, I should reiterate, represent all of those initial recommendations from the TIP readiness days. So the recommended years for these projects in these scenarios now show where those projects will stand. With that, if we move on to the next slide, The goal of these scenarios, which I am getting to, is to provide the board with multiple options and perspectives on how new projects can be funded through the TIP. This year, just as was initially done last year, these three scenarios are a baseline project readiness scenario, a scenario that prioritizes projects that performed well against the scoring criteria or the scoring criteria scenario, and a cost effectiveness scenario that prioritizes projects based on a cost per point basis for their scoring. If we go on to the next slide, I'd just like to tick off some boxes regarding assumptions here. These scenarios incorporate the most current information available for all projects. Things change, and namely that comes in the fashion of the readiness updates that I just mentioned earlier in this presentation, such as delays and inflation factors that can result from delaying a project further out. This also bakes in increases in project budgets. Moreover, these assumptions also incorporate the ongoing set-asides and obligations for investment programs like transit modernization, currently at $6.5 million a year, and community connections, assuming a constant $2.5 million a year funding level. If we go on to the next slide, I'd like to go into a little bit more detail on the baseline readiness scenario. This is not entirely a new scenario. Rather, it is a slight modification to the readiness update table that was provided at the February 16th MPO board meeting and really serves as the baseline foundation for the other two scenarios under discussion today. It solely incorporates the readiness updates for existing projects and does not account for any new projects. This illustrates the $202 million of initial funding availability for any new project across all of the TIP years. In addition, critically, to advance construction on some existing TIP projects. Advanced construction refers to projects whose budgets are programmed across multiple fiscal years, like the Mount Auburn Street project mentioned earlier in this presentation, or more permanently, the Rutherford Avenue project. Projects like Rutherford Avenue in Charlestown, McGrath Highway in Somerville, and Route 107 Western Avenue in Lynn were programmed in the last TIP cycle with the expectation that their budgets would require such funding scheduling effectively. With McGrath Highway and Lynn's Western Avenue projects continuing beyond their start year of 2027 into 2028, their AC schedule programs $30 million for McGrath Highway in 2028 and an additional $20 million for Western Avenue in 2028, just to make sure that those projects remain on track and their total estimated budget can be fulfilled in these programming scenarios. Rutherford also remains programmed for $33.5 million in 2028. If we can go over two slides, I can actually show what the baseline looks like here, or rather the bottom line looks like for the 6-year programming scenario, programming summary for the readiness scenario. Now, as mentioned, this shows funding availability remaining across all 6 fiscal years, but the back 5, 2024 to 2028, are the primary focus of today's discussion. As this table illustrates, there was $202 million of available programming across all fiscal years at the start of the scenario development process, with funding in each fiscal year. This included $32.8 million in 2024, $33.7 in 2025, $24 million in 2026, and $54.6 million in 2027. Of the initial approximately $158 million apportioned this year for regional target funding, for 2028, I should say, after accounting for the advanced construction and project readiness considerations, in addition to those set-asides, there remained about $56.9 million left to program new projects in fiscal year 2028. With that, if we go on to the next slide, we can move on really to the new project programming scenarios, starting off with the scoring criteria scenario. The scoring criteria scenario prioritizes projects that score the highest and generally selects projects not only based on scores, but makes programming recommendations based on the year where that project has sufficient readiness. While this scenario funds 13 new projects, it still results in a funding availability of $134.5 million across fiscal years 24, 5, and 7. This scenario also incorporates 2 new line items, including a bike share support line item through fiscal years 2025 and 2028 to the amount of about $1 million for each of those years, and a $1.5 million line item in fiscal year 2025 to pilot potentially using regional target funding through the MPO to support project design efforts from municipalities starting in 2025 as a pilot project. If we go on to the next slide, we can start discussing specifically what projects are appearing in here. Starting off with community connections projects, as was discussed earlier, there's about $640,000 left to program new projects this year, remaining in that aforementioned $2.5 million set aside. The scoring criteria scenario for community connections is largely identical to what the next scenario 3 will show for community connections, based on scoring performance and fiscal constraint. The projects shown here largely performed highly in both of those categories. This scenario funds one new shuttle pilot project, which is an expansion of an existing Catch Connect shuttle project from the Metro West Regional Transit Authority's, or RTA's, shuttle service. This is phase 2 of that project's expansion. The next is the Broad Street Corridor Transit Signal Priority Project from Lynn, the Blue Bikes Expansion Project in Medford, and in addition, some bicycle parking projects, starting with what is being referred to as the Tier 1 Priority Areas Bicycle Parking Expansion Project in Medford, Tier 1 referring to the city's prioritization of specific locations to install those racks, and 2 projects in Canton being bicycle racks for Canton Center at key downtown locations and transit hubs, and also the Canton Public Schools Bike Program, which, as the name suggests, provides new bicycle racks for students at public schools throughout the town of Canton. After these projects are considered for with regard to their budgets, that leaves about $22,952 remaining in the federal fiscal year 2024 set aside, though there are no other projects that could be funded with that remaining amount in the set aside. If we go on to the next slide, we can then begin discussing which years the additional TIP investment projects were programmed in. Starting off with the aforementioned kind of administrative line items for newly programmed projects, this begins with the bike share state of good repair line item, which is at $1 million each year from federal fiscal years 2025 to 28. As previously stated in the prior presentation on the LRTP, the focus on the state of good repair line item specifically is provide $1 million a year to support capital investments in bike share infrastructure to ensure that existing infrastructure remains in a state of good repair as it reaches the end of its useful life, generally about 10 years on. This also incorporates $1.5 million in fiscal year 2025 only to identify any possibilities for using MPO regional target funding to finance project design by municipalities. This would be a pilot effort to really explore a foray into opening up the project pipeline and facilitating support from the MPO at different stages of a project's life cycle. In federal fiscal year 2026, this really begins with some of the new projects that were applied for formally during the last application cycle. Starting off based on project readiness, the Boston Bridge Preservation Project for the Cambridge Street Bridge over the MBTA, which includes structural steel repairs, deck replacement, the addition of a westbound bus lane, and additional multimodal connections for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, has been programmed in 2026 to the amount of $15.4 million. In federal fiscal year 2027, the Malden Spot Pond Brook Greenway has been recommended for programming to the amount of $3.25 million. This is a shared use path construction throughout the city of Malden, primarily in the downtown zone, moving north towards Coitmore Lee Park on the northern side of the city. If we go on to the next slide, we can now discuss really what 3 projects have been programmed in federal fiscal years 2028. This starts with the Natick-Cochituate Rail Trail Extension Project, which takes the Cochituate Rail Trail from its current terminus at Mechanic Street and brings it into the currently under construction Natick Center MBTA station. Hence, this project is also being referred to locally as the Natick Center Connection. The next is the Envision Wakefield or Wakefield Town Center Comprehensive Downtown Transportation Improvement Project. This is a complete streets project that not only seeks to make state of good repair investments to Wakefield's main street, but also critically to improve bicycle and pedestrian access through construction of shared use paths, parking reconfiguration, curb extensions to really make a more complete street. And third is what a reconstruction of Canton Street from the East Street Rotary to University Drive between Westwood and Norwood. This project, as was mentioned earlier in this meeting, includes the replacement or rather work on a bridge down near the south side of the project limits by University Avenue, but critically not only reconstructs the roadway, but adds sidewalks to a section of road that currently does not have any sidewalks, north of that bridge, effectively the vast majority of the project area. It also incorporates a shared use path on the east side of the roadway, which connects into additional work that the town is currently exploring along local side streets like Blue Hill Drive, and furthermore provides additional connections into University Avenue and the Route 128 MBTA University Park Amtrak station as well. With that, if we go on to the next slide, you can see how the funding remains after accounting for these scenarios. Primarily, the funding that is available is $134.52 million, or approximately 19.3% of remaining balance. If we go on to the next slide, you can see where the years remain that primarily have the most funding, starting off with a significant funding availability still in 24 and 5, just given that there were not many projects ready for programming in those years, of $32.8 million in 24 and $30.67 million in 2025, but also primarily fiscal year 2027 at $50.3 million, or a 32.5% funding availability for this year. In federal fiscal year 2028, there were projects that were not selected for programming in that year. As is shown here, only 8.6% or $13.6 million remained to fund projects in that year. Traditionally, the TIP leaves additional funding available in the final year of the TIP to act as contingency for potential cost overruns, and also to account for the potential for additional projects that may come in future TIP cycles, as was the case this year, where 2027 initially had about $20 million going into it. Of course, things changed after Project Readiness and additional identification of funding apportionments. With that, we can move into the third scenario, which in many ways is similar to the second one. This is the cost effectiveness scenario, which prioritizes funding for projects deemed cost effective. Now, how is cost effectiveness defined? The score of a project is taken and then divided by the total overall construction cost of that contract to obtain a cost per point for those projects. This scenario primarily funds new projects in federal fiscal years 2028 and holds an increased amount of funding in reserve for federal fiscal year 2028 to the amount of $21.7 million. It still funds the same number on the aggregate of new projects, with 13 new projects funded, and leaves $142.6 million of available funding, primarily in federal fiscal years 24, 5, and 7. If we go on to the next slide, as mentioned earlier, these are the same 6 community connections projects in this scenario that appeared in the other scenario too for cost effectiveness. Each of these projects performed highly as far as their cost per point for each of the projects. To reiterate again, this is the Catch Connect Microtransit Expansion Phase 2, the Broad Street Corridor Transit Signal Priority Project, the Blue Bikes Expansion Project in Medford, the Bicycle Parking Tier 1 project in Medford, and Canton's Canton Center Bicycle Racks and Canton Public Schools Bike Program. And given that this is identical, this scenario also leaves $22,952 in the federal fiscal year 2024 set aside as far as what is remaining. Going on onto the next slide, similarly, these 4 line items showed here are also identical to the scoring scenario, including the bike share state of good repair line item, that $1 million still, and that $1.5 million project design support pilot in fiscal year 2025. And similarly, the Boston Bridge Preservation Cambridge Street project still appears in federal fiscal year 26, and Malden Spot Pond Brook Greenway in federal fiscal year 2027. If we go on to the next slide, there is one difference critically between this scenario and the other scenarios being discussed here today. This comes in the form, while this scenario still funds the Cochituate Rail Trail extension in Natick and the Envision Wakefield Comprehensive Downtown Transportation Improvement Project, the third project selected for programming in fiscal year 28 is Bellingham's roadway rehabilitation of Route 126, Hartford Road, which goes from 800 feet north of the I-495 northbound ramps to the Medway town line. This is also a project that incorporates bridge improvements, namely bridge widening, to incorporate bicycle lanes throughout the corridor and ensure the extension of bilateral sidewalks along this corridor in Bellingham. This project scored similarly to other projects within the complete streets category, but did have an estimated overall budget that was lower than other projects that were under discussion and evaluation. If we go to the next slide, we can see again the bottom line financials, leaving about $142.6 million of total available funding, or total bandwidth of 20.4% across each of the 5 fiscal years. With, if we go to the next slide, a similar amount of funding remaining in fiscal years 24, 5, and 7. 32.8 million in 24, 30.6 million in 25, or 30.7, I should say, and 50.3 in federal fiscal year 2027. Now, if we go on to the next slide, this next table just provides a stack against how each of the scenarios perform against one another. As stated previously, scenario 1 does not fund any new projects, but scenarios 2 and scenario 3 are fairly similar in that they fund the same number of total overall projects and leave a similar amount of remaining funding in federal fiscal years 24 and 5. But one major consideration is that the cost effectiveness scenario leaves additional funding for contingency in federal fiscal year 2028, whereas the scoring criteria scenario better prioritizes projects that not only scored higher, but also scores more projects that have surpassed the MPO's threshold of obtaining a 25% design. Also, something that should be considered as we discuss scenarios here, these scenarios do not account for any new projects funded, or rather presented or funded by MassDOT, as those projects were not available for the construction of these scenarios, nor do any of these scenarios account for any projects from the MBTA. If we go on to the next steps here, I would kind of like to start by discussing an overall review on any MBTA projects that may be presented. Going forward with the scenarios, there may be additional review and analysis of new MassDOT and MBTA proposed projects. Currently, the MPO also has funding for a Forest Hills project in federal fiscal year 2024. And there's also the need for additional reconsideration of the possibility of balancing advanced construction funding in federal fiscal year 2027. Now, it's also my understanding that the MBTA has some slides that I believe they wanted to present at this stage in the presentation to go into more detail on their projects. Though I do not know if they are available.
Jillian, do you have slides?
Can you allow Jillian to unmute, please?
All right, there we go. Sorry. I will lower my hand. So I'm pulling up the slides, is that correct?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. All right, give me a second. Oh. Oh, right. Haven't used
While Jillian is
Zoom.
doing that, this is John Bouchard from MassDOT. Ethan, that was an outstanding summary of many scenarios, and I just want to commend you before we move on to the next piece. That was extremely detailed, helpful, informative, and I just want to make sure that I recognize that was great work. Thank you. Sorry. Go ahead, Jillian. Sorry.
No, I appreciate the stall and assist, so thank you. All right. Can everyone see a slide that says MBTA projects for consideration? All right.
We can see it.
Thank you. All right. So I hope most of you know who I am, but for those of you who haven't heard me speak at the MPO before, my name is Jillian Linnell. I'm the Senior Director of Capital Program Planning at the MBTA. And thank you for the opportunity to present a couple of MBTA projects for TIP funding consideration. I do want to apologize up front. We have done this a couple of times in the last couple of years, and we have committed to trying to get this information to the members before the actual meeting. And we did fail in that effort this year, and I apologize. It is a little hectic. We will keep it as our goal, but I do realize everyone is seeing this cold, and that's not ideal. So that being said, the following list of projects, which are summarized here, but that I will go into a little bit more detail on some additional slides, were primarily identified through the MBTA's fiscal year 24 to 28 CIP development process, which is currently underway. For those of you who are not aware of the MBTA's current schedule, we have presented the proposed CIP to our Administration and Finance Committee. We are presenting it to the MBTA board next week, at which point it will be released publicly for public comment. So we're in a little bit of a midpoint in our own CIP development process. Currently, these projects that are summarized here are not proposed for funding in our 5-year CIP. They are still identified as priorities for the MBTA, but due to limited resources, aka funding, they were not able to be funded in this 5-year capital plan. So the driver behind a number of these projects was that they are federally eligible. They are currently advancing through design, so they are very much ready, with most of these able to go into an advanced stage of design or construction starting next year. And they are located with the MPO regions. And as I mentioned, they have been identified through our CIP development process and are priorities for the agency, recognizing that we have a large sense of needs and not unlimited resources. So they do follow a similar theme to what we have presented to the MPO in the past, meaning they do focus on passenger station facilities, accessibility improvements, customer amenities, and this year we have incorporated one commuter rail project in addition to bus lanes. So with that, I will go into them in a bit more detail. And I believe the slides have been made available to the MPO, so I hope that we can make them available to MPO members, but I will defer to my to MPO staff on that. So the first two projects that I wanted to cover are both station accessibility and state of good repair projects that have been advanced as part of the MBTA's ongoing vertical access improvement effort, where we have advanced design work for the replacement of elevators and redundant elevators and related wayfinding amenities at transit stations across the network. The first project is a total of $44.3 million for station improvements at Mass Ave Station on the Orange Line. The project scope includes a new elevator and head house, elevator replacement and improvements to the existing station and escalators. The second is $26.3 million for station improvements at Jackson Square Station, also on the Orange Line. Again, this effort, which has been designed as a package actually with the Mass Ave project, but that can be separated into two standalone projects, includes construction of a new elevator, modernization of the existing elevator, lighting improvements, and various state of good repair improvements to the station. Moving on, the third project is for additional funds to support what we commonly refer to as early action items for rail transformation. These are no regret investments that will provide benefits to customers regardless of the fleet or power technologies that are ultimately chosen. To date, the focus of the investments has been on turn tracks that will enable higher frequency services. The MBTA's proposed 24 to 28 CIP does include some funding for this work, but these funds would support additional scope beyond what we are currently able to fund in our capital program. The specific scope of work is estimated to cost $14 million and would include the addition of turn tracks at Reading Station on the Haverhill Line and improvements to the siding at Wilbur interlocking on the Lowell Line. And then finally, the fourth project should be familiar to MPO members as the Columbus Ave Bus Lane Phase 2 project. This is to extend the existing center running bus lane north from Jackson Square to Ruggles Station. This is an existing project that's previously been funded by the MPO with a current budget of $14.8 million. This project is being advanced jointly by the MBTA and the City of Boston. The initial cost estimate, which was developed in early stages of development, was largely limited to the construction of bus lanes and platforms, and the updated cost estimate, which is requesting an additional $11.7 million, would reflect a more mature understanding of the implementation of these bus lanes and also include new elements such as enhanced accessibility features, sidewalk and curb ramp reconstructions, upgrade to traffic signals, and significant green infrastructure that is consistent with the city-wide directive. As I mentioned, this is additional funding for an existing project that would bring the total project cost up to $26.5 million, with the request being for an additional 11.7. That is that essentially wraps up the list of projects. I am happy to, I will say that I do have some colleagues from the MBTA and from the city of Boston here. If there's any questions about the Columbus Ave bus lane phase 2 project, they are, I'm sure, happy to help answer any of those questions. But yeah, I'd happy, yeah, turn it over to discussion, or David.
Ethan, you have your hand up. Is there a reason?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I actually still have some slides left in the remainder of the presentation just to introduce the discussion.
Excellent. So we will call on people after you're done for their questions for anyone. Keep going, Ethan.
So with that, thank you very much, Jillian. That was a great overview. If we can go on to the next slide, we can talk a little bit more about next steps. As mentioned earlier in this presentation, this is a preliminary discussion that will help to inform the final programming scenarios for selection at the next MPO meeting on March 30th, with a mid-April draft release for the TIP for public review and comment, and a June 1st endorsement date. If we go into the next slide, just to kind of guide the discussion a little bit, and the one after, there are a few discussion slides here. First off, raising the question of what options the MPO would like to see for addressing funding surpluses in federal fiscal years 24, 5, and 7, namely new projects. To what extent should outer year funds, namely 27 and 8, be allocated? Should more funding be left unallocated, contingencies increased or reduced? And for the next slide, what are the MPO's priorities for funding projects within the Community Connections program, given the constrained amount in the federal fiscal year 24 set aside, the possibility a similar situation may emerge in federal fiscal year 25, so next year, and also the aforementioned parking management system project request of about $15,000. Finally, the fourth question, what additional scenarios or information would be helpful for staff to provide for the next board meeting, in addition to some of the tweaks and additional discussions here. And then the next slide just shows all four of those on the same slide. So I'll pause there and I will open it for discussion.
Before we open it up for discussion, John Bouchard just put in the chat that the Highway Division would like to share some thoughts. So John Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Moeller. Thank you, everyone. Jillian, thank you for your the projects that you offered up. I have just a couple of points I wanted to discuss with the MPO. Would like to offer kind of like a high-level discussion of opportunities and projects for possible funding by the MPO. Our emphasis areas that we feel share a common vision and goal with the MPO include, shared use path projects, intersection safety projects, and then also a few bridge projects with investments beyond a state of good repair. I'm just going to share one sheet that I'd like to talk to, and then kind of like a tracking sheet. And let me just do that. I think for me to continue, I have to ask Ethan or Erin, whoever's sharing theirs, to pull theirs down. Okay. Well, my scenario is not pulling up here, but I'll talk from them anyway here. So the Highway Division is considering a number of projects that are currently programmed with state funds, CMAQ and HSIP, that could be shifted to MPO funds to help fill some of the gaps in the fiscal 24 to 28 TIP. We're still working through the details on the project specifics at this time, and we'll have a more detailed plan to present and discuss on the 30th. As I said, I have a brief tracking sheet that I want to share. But that, we're having a little trouble. Maybe I can email it to Ethan or I can post it in the chat. We're evaluating these projects and investments. On the top part of the sheet are several shared use path projects in the region that MassDOT is overseeing the design, and these projects are in varying stages of completion. The middle portion of this tracking sheet our intersection and safety projects, one in Somerville at McGrath Highway and I-93 and Mystic Ave, which is in the top 200 crash location. And the second one is in Medford at Main Street, South Street, Main Street, Mystic Valley Parkway, and Main Street at Mystic Ave, the two intersection projects. Excuse me. And lastly, we have a few bridge projects in the region. Normally, we do not propose bridge projects to the region, although this body has been, a strong supporter and partnered with us in the past, just in the last year with the Marfa Way and Mystic Ave project. When we really appreciate the MPO support on that. We have a project that's the Boca project, which is a significant investment that we're working on to replace two structurally deficient bridges, Sturrow Drive over the Muddy River and the Boca ramps, and then the Boca overpass over I-90. Now, MassDOT's working with the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, Charles Gate Alliance, and the Esplanade Association on those projects. And that project will provide, propose to daylight the Muddy River, open up 5 acres of the Esplanade to public use, and also connect the Emerald Necklace across I-90, in the city. It's just if we can't fund that, or if we fund that with bridge funds, it's a significant investment that would, prevent us from doing other structure. Our biggest concern is structurally deficient, bridges within the Commonwealth that we're trying to attack. And while we think the Boca project is a great and worthy project, it just doesn't meet all of our challenges on improving our infrastructure. So we'll be back with more details, as I said, on the 30th, but I wanted to, let me see if I could share one more time. No, it keeps pulling up the sharing other stuff. Nope. All right, so I'll stop doing that.
All right, you can take control back over the screen, will you? And then we'll start calling on people. Put your last slide back up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ethan, and everyone else. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John, and I've already got members with their hands up, so I'll start with Jamie.
Does that mean, Mr. Chair?
Excuse me, Jay?
Did you call me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you to all three of you. Ethan, fantastic presentation. Jillian, thank you for all your work, hard work, and the team's hard work, and John as well. I'll start, John, thank you. I think it's refreshing to hear the amount of thought you guys put into the MassDOT projects, which hopefully we'll be seeing more of next week. I know in past years it's been kind of a rush, and sometimes the projects brought to us maybe didn't quite fit the MPO's goals, but it sounds like listening to what you just said, that you guys put some real thought into how your projects can best match our priorities. So thank you. So the bulk of my comments actually were to Jillian and the T, and these are all great projects. I'm more than happy to get behind all of them. That said, they are, I'll say Boston centric, interport centric, right? And so I think back to our discussion about, geographic equity and we talked before about blue bikes and some of the new categories. The one that stood out to me is one that could be more geographically equitable is the commuter rail. And I'm just wondering, are there any other projects that maybe haven't, we have till 2028 here, so we've got a few years to think about maybe other action items for regional rail that we might be willing to fund, or maybe this is out to the RTAs too as well, beyond the MBTA. Other transit projects from the RTAs that would be suitable. So support all these. I hope we can fund all of them. And I would just ask maybe, are there any more, right, that we could think about programming? Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. Jim Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just want to address a few projects, and starting with the most complicated one, Rutherford Ave. I think this board understands the change in direction for that project, and in working with our partners at MassDOT, MBTA, other municipalities as well. I think everyone knows that we are reconsidering the design approach to that project. It's obviously very complicated and very impactful. I think, at a couple meetings ago, we had requested reconsideration for potentially getting it started in 2026. I know our consultant team right now is developing a more detailed schedule and phasing approach to the project and how we could start that in 2026. I think it is critical to get it started as soon as possible, because we all know it's a very big project. It has very expensive as well, but I think very impactful and very important. I think this kind of the design changes that we are working on are going to wind up being for a better project for everybody and for the region. So I know I'm hoping to share some more information early next week from our consultant team with our colleagues at MassDOT, et cetera, on how we think we can move forward with pieces of the project in 2026. Maybe it's not needed to be a full 33 million as in the first year in 2026, as is now funded in the different scenarios that Ethan presented in 28. Maybe it's a smaller amount. In previous iterations of the approach to the project have kind of done that, $9-10 million type of start for the project. So I think hopefully more information, more concrete information to come at our next meeting, and in the interim as well, sharing with our partners in that project. Somewhat obviously also related to that is the Cambridge Street Bridge. I know both scenarios, the new scenarios that Ethan presented have that on 2026. And I know that's kind of a crunch year as far as available funds, and I would propose that that could potentially move up to 2025. I think it would help with sequencing as well, and I think it would sequence well with the Moffett and Mystic bridges as well, because it could follow right after those as well, and then follow well with sequencing of the start of Rutherford in 26. As far as the MBTA projects, certainly the city is been partnering closely with the MBTA and the Columbus Phase 2 BRT project. I think the success of the first phase of that is obvious, and I think we're very excited to move forward with the second phase of that project, which would, as Julian and most folks know, would extend it from Jackson Square up to Ruggles. I think the additional funding, as Julian outlined, is for I think some really important elements as far as green infrastructure, some additional geographic scope that is needed to make the project better. And I think we're really excited about keeping that project moving forward and getting it built. So I know I said a lot, but I guess I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Jim. Dennis Giambetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions. One for John. Did you say that the projects that you mentioned were currently on the SIP?
Yes, some of these projects are actually statewide funded projects, and that have varying CMAQ and HSIP funds in the specific years that we're looking to help the MPO by shifting those projects over to the MPO target funds.
Okay. Second would be the question for the T. Where would the projects that you outlined, what years would they be thought to be programmed in? Do you have an idea what years they'd be ready?
All of these are ready to go as early as 24.
24, okay. Thank you. And the other comment I had, if you could put the slide up for where the unprogrammed dollars are currently in each of the years, that'd be very helpful. Just to thank you. A couple things, ideas is one is that before we allocated too much money to programs that are not currently being evaluated or not currently in the either the tip, adding the T's or the other projects on the SIP. I'm wondering if there are any projects that are in the outer years could be accelerated to be brought in to previous years. I'd like to know what the readiness of the potential of doing that, especially the ones that are out in 27 and 28. Are there any opportunities to bring those in? And are there other projects that not funded either by the SIP or looking to be funded by the TIF? Are there any other projects that we could consider doing in those years that have funding available?
Ethan?
Thank you, Dennis. One of the considerations that came up during the TIP readiness days back in February, on February 8th, I believe, was that there were no projects currently programmed in the MPO's TIP that were recommended by MassDOT for acceleration. So to our knowledge, none of these scenarios account for acceleration on any of the projects in the program. And we've been working closely between MPO staff and other stakeholders in the process, including municipalities and MassDOT, to ensure that the readiness of those projects and what is being reported here is accurate. That's my understanding it is.
Okay. Is there any opportunity to, seeing that the pipeline for projects have decreased significantly over the last few years, I suspect for a number of reasons, is there any opportunity to try to build a pipeline for the outer years where there's some monies available to kind of encourage people to advance some projects that might be able to be filled in there? Because one of the burdens that cities and towns have in advancing is the risk of not getting funding. But if there is some fundings available that we could try to encourage them to seek in the later years, it may be an advantage to help build a pipeline or encourage the pipeline.
So I will note, Dennis, two things. First, Ethan has put, or I shouldn't say Ethan, the staff has put in here pilot in FY25 for $1.5 million of design funds, where I guess the MPO would somehow figure out a way to pick a project or more than one project and fund design. Equally, the governor in her budget has put in money for design for cities and towns. It may not survive the budget, but it is there. It is specifically for design projects for cities and towns to get TIP projects ready. And then finally, I would note that I think your question is about focused more on maybe leaving some money unprogrammed in the outer years so that people see there's money there and they're not, they realize they have real money to compete for, not get a project ready. If we can figure it out, we will.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's all. Yeah, that is always available. I mean, that's up to the MPO, but we can always under program years. We just can't over program. Eric Barassa.
Thank you. John, did you say you have a list of these projects and you just don't, you weren't able to display
Yes,
them?
Eric, I'm sorry, I'm just unable to share my screen for some reason. I tried and it won't work, so I've emailed that list. And believe me, this is a very high level, quick snapshot that we started working on the last 2 weeks, and we'll have a more detailed breakdown of the projects, the years, the values, et cetera, before the 30th. And if we can get that to the MPO staff, it'll get circulated as part of the agenda, in advance of the meeting. And I apologize. It's not, I don't say it's not well thought out. It's detailed. It's one page of, 6 or 7 shared use path projects, 2 intersections, and a handful of bridges that we're reviewing. But I think it meets the goals that we've discussed with the MPO, but I'm still working through the details with my team. So apologize for that.
Okay. And then John, did you say in response to Dennis's question that these are projects, or some of these projects are already programmed on the TIP and
They're programmed on the state side of the TIP.
all of them?
All of them.
As of today.
As of today, yes.
We have not yet provided the MPOs with our updated lists, right? Project costs have gone up. Our list, much like the regional list, our list is in a state of flux and changing. So if you looked at today's STIP, yes, they are all programmed. That does not mean they will all be in a list we bring you when we bring the list, which I hope will be ready by the 30th. If that's correct, John, right?
Yes, that's
Maybe this
correct.
is already out,
Thank
and I
you.
just don't know.
Okay, so there's the potential that, given project cost increases, that we could absorb one of these that might get, you know, taken off the statewide list because of financial constraint.
Yes.
That's sort of what you're saying.
Yeah, there's always that, but I don't know that that's going to happen, okay? I don't, isn't, you know, we wouldn't do it without coming to you and saying, hey, can you do this? But I just don't want to mislead anybody. There's always a chance that our lists are in a state of flux.
Yeah, I just think that distinction is important versus like, oh, we would take these on and then that would free up other money for other MassDOT things that.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, it'd be good to know how all of those pieces kind of fit together. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And then for Boston, for the Columbus Ave project, that project is, that also could go in 24, given just all the, you know, all the complexity of projects in Boston and sort of the delays we've seen.
I think it's a question for you, Jim.
Oh, sure. Jillian might, I'm assuming will reinforce it. Yes, we are confident that that can be programmed in 24 and actually move into construction. So yes.
Okay. Great, thank you. I'll hold other questions for now.
Yeah. Ken Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ethan, can you go to the slide that shows scenario 1? You know, the big spreadsheet. No, the one that shows all the projects. I'm just trying to understand what a couple of the columns mean. So first, let me, thank you for trying to including more detailed project status information, but there are 2 columns in scenario 1. One is, I guess.
Yeah, so that sheet's in the information that was provided in advance of the meeting. I don't believe that sheet's part of the presentation.
Oh, you didn't show that? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, well, okay, so
but you can still talk.
I just had a question as to what the columns mean. So we did show some project status information, but there's 2 columns. One is about design day, town design day status. Another one is project status, and they don't both always agree. So I'm just wondering what which controls and why there would be different information.
As far as the information there, the project status that is on the right side, which is just labeled project status, represents the most up-to-date information from MassDOT's project info system. What is in the TRD design status reflects the project status as of the tip readiness days on February 8th, which were what informed the initial readiness scenario presented on February 16th, and therefore what the color coding corresponds to.
Okay, because I noticed that in scenario 2 and 3, you only have 1 column. And so, which is good. We talk about, 25% received, or 20, but I think it would be great if you could, I think 1 column is sufficient. Just use the best information that you have, whether it's, from the information system or from what you've heard, but it would be great if you had, for example, if you could expand that 1 column comments. So for example, 25% received and put the date in. I think that's very useful information, or, or when there was a design public hearing. So I think that if that could be, if you could explore maybe including a little bit more information in that column, I think that would be very helpful. And I did have a question, I guess, to Dennis's question about accelerating projects. I noticed that on some of these, there are projects that have already had the design public hearing, but are in 3 years out. And so I was just, would it be possible to really go through the list of projects and target a couple of, 2 or 3 or 4 projects that are already at a certain stage, to see if they can, with a concentrated effort, if they can be accelerated to try to fill some of the gap in the earlier years. I think that might be possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Brian King.
Thanks, David. Do we have to make this decision today is my question?
Ethan, I don't think we're making a decision today, are we? This is more just a discussion, I think, right, Ethan?
Yes, the purpose of this presentation, Brian, is just to start a preliminary discussion, and the feedback provided here by the board today will help to inform updated scenarios that will be presented on March 30th.
Okay, so I guess what I would like is, can we get all of the requested stuff in a document? John's stuff, Jillian's stuff, your stuff, and then let us sort of compare and contrast. And by the 30th, we'll probably be, I for one will be much more prepared to move forward.
I can do that.
So yeah, David, that's a question to you, I guess. Can you just make sure we get that, please?
Yes, Ethan will get that out to everybody. We will get Ethan what he needs from us, and he will get it out to everyone. Eric Barras.
Yeah, and I think it would also be great if maybe in this interim, if we also could, hear from the T as well as MassDOT on what of these new projects, which of these are their sort of priorities? How would they kind of prioritize these? Like more information about that. If we were gonna, take on, say, one of these MBTA projects, which one would they feel like is the most important? Is it the Columbus Ave one, because that's already a project and it's about building off of an existing thing? I think more information there would be great. The same with the MassDOT projects too. I think the Somerville one is building off of expanding an existing, sort of the existing scope of the scope of an existing project. Just more information like that. And then Ethan, maybe to the extent that you can incorporate this into some of these different scenarios. I think it's always, nice to see how these fit in with the funding, and kind of, the fitting projects in with funding is always a challenge. I think another piece of this is also just the geographic, distribution as well. That we've got,
Ethan, you muted, someone muted everyone. Eric, hold on a second. Everyone's muted except I think I just unmuted myself. Now go again, Eric. We heard you say it was difficult fitting things in, and then the host accidentally muted everyone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know, I was saying, to the extent that for the next time we meet, maybe a few different scenarios, fitting project costs in is always a challenge. Sometimes just the mere fact of what the project costs makes sense in terms of where it fits. I'm talking primarily about the sort of the near term unprogrammed funds. And then I was saying, I think, also an eye towards geographic distribution. Obviously the MBTA projects predominantly are kind of in the inner core in Boston. The commuter rail ones, I think, benefit, the municipalities, along those lines, but taking, a few different things into consideration. I know that these projects can't be scored per se, or we don't have the time to score them. But any thinking like that in terms of putting them into scenarios would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Bent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things on Ethan, on your, if you could go back to your that last slide about the topics we're discussing now. One of the things that I would be interested in is seeing money set aside for escalation, because I think David mentioned it earlier, but we're seeing that across the board. So I think we need to plan for that also. So I think that would be prudent to do that. And then, one of the projects that John Prashad brought up, the Somerville Mystic Ave, it's the highest crash rate I think in the state. So that should be a priority also. So those are the couple of things that I just wanted to bring up today, just for thought. Then also, is there another meeting next week, or is it not until the 30th?
Not till the
David?
30th.
So no meeting next week?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Other questions or comments? Ethan, do you have everything you need from us?
I have everything I need, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda is member items. Bill Conroy.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to announce that to the group at the MPO that tomorrow will be my last day working at the city of Boston. It has been a good run, and I've been blessed with 27 years at the city. The work was great, and the friendships and the laughs we had along the way were irreplaceable. But I also want to thank the 97 municipalities that represent the MPO in various ways that have helped me to grow over the last 4 years. I personally want to thank the late Tom Menino for bringing me in back in April of '96 to work on the Big Dig as part of the Central Arteries team for the city of Boston. I really had no idea how my life would have changed and the direction it would go. I'm truly grateful for him for that. And I also want to thank my former boss, Jim Galuli, who taught me the fine art of achieving one's goal is not always going in a straight line. Jim was like my father figure as well. David knows that as well. He showed me so many other things outside of the engineering that I did know, and that was my strength. But all my weaknesses were filled with various other people along the way, especially people on this call as well. The relationships I've built here over the last 4 years just speak volumes, and I want to thank you all as well. I won't be going too far. I'll be relocating on the 27th of this month down to Mass DOT at 10 Park Plaza, where I'll take on the next chapter of my life, where I'll be a supervising project manager for major projects, working with Mike O'Dowd's group. So I want to thank everybody on the call, and I want to thank you for your kindness over the years to me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and we will miss you. Although I won't miss you because I'll see you every day, but thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other member items? Seeing none, can I get a motion?
Dennis has his hand raised.
Oh, no, but I think, Dennis, do you have your hand raised or? Still have your hand raised from the MPO discussion, I think.
Yes.
Thank you. Eric, you want to make a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Is there a second? Hey, Bill, second that motion, will you, so you can get us out of here?
I'll second that motion. Thank you. Thank
That
you all.
motion has been made and seconded. Without objection, we are adjourned. Bye, everybody.
Bye.